Okay, so clinical supervision, as with the counselor, as with everything in the ACA Code of Ethics, there are specific ethical codes that are specifically targeting the conversation of clinical supervision. Uh, in your case, the most current 2014 Code of Ethics, it's in Section F. So if you're acting in the supervision, training, or teaching capacity with someone, another professional, then your first most ethics value is toward the client welfare. Um, the person that you're providing supervision to, you have to make sure that they're credentialed to do what you're training them to do, and that the clients that that person has are informed in their consent that they are under supervision and that you're involved in their care in that capacity. Oops. Um, as a supervisor, a lot of the states, and we'll get to that, you have to have a specialized training to provide clinical supervision to people in residency. And so you have to make sure that you're competent, and different states regulate what that level of competency is and how they manage that. Um, you also want to be trained in different types of diverse values, because not only for the clients that are being served, but also there may be diverse differences between you and your supervisee. And you want to know what the rules and regulations are about online supervision, and that can vary from state to state. But online supervision is allowed through ACA Code of Ethics, but that doesn't mean that your state or your agency allows that. So you always got to think about your ethical codes as that big umbrella, like here's all the things that are okay or not okay, but the states themselves can narrow that, and then your agencies can narrow that even more. The supervisor relationship, uh, it's very similar to that with the client. You should not have any type of intimate or close relationships with this person, because then you can't be an effective supervisor. Um, as the supervisor, you're the clinical supervisor in this course. So remember, you're the one in charge when you're writing this stuff. You're not saying what you want your person to be. You are that person. And so you would have to have an informed consent that your supervisee would know, like, what your expectations are, what's the regulations, what if you can't be reached, all those kind of things, what to do in the case of emergency, what the time frame you're putting on it, what your fee is for services if you're charging for that, and what rights you have or they have at termination. Um, you have to go over ethics. There's, rules about, obviously you don't do that. You don't provide supervision if you're impaired. You don't want to disclose too much, but you can, as a clinical supervisor, really give examples of your past experience as a clinician to show them like how you've learned and grown. You are a gatekeeper. Your goal as a clinical supervisor is doing remediation, helping someone else master skills, and gatekeeping and protecting the clients that are being served. Um, So those website links are here, but they are also on your Blackboard page. Each state, depending on which state you're going to get licensed in, each state has a little tweak on their license requirement, whether that's they may accept the CACREP standard courses, but then they may also add an additional course. They may accept one of the two national exams that we have, the NCMHCE or the NCE. They may accept that as their exam, but they may also have a separate exam or an additional exam as well into that. So you need to know what the requirements are. So there are going to be specific numbers you have to have of direct service, what what counts as direct service, how you can or cannot do individual and group supervision. So part of being a supervisor is knowing the rules and regulations for that state. So part of the being a supervisor is knowing the rules and regulations for that state. Examples of specific things would be Texas has a specific educational requirement, which is why we're going over Texas today, because Texas requires that in your educational piece that you explore some of the rules, regulations, laws that are specific to Texas, and that students know where those are. Tennessee and Texas both have a jurisprudence test in addition to the state exam. Florida, you have to take a human sexuality class, and Virginia only accepts the NCMHCE. And so there's a lot of differences per state. Make sure that you take the time, look at some of this stuff, and you can use my chart as like looking at for specific things that you wanted to look at. So the first review of Texas state laws are that you have to have a master's program and a 60-hour credit semester. That's kind of a norm, but there might be differences, a little bit of differences. And so the difference unique to this state is that you have to have uh, an additional course including record management, overview of business, family law, and practice, and the study of the current council rules, which is what we're going to go over. You have to have clinical requirements in Texas of a specific amount of time. So here it says you have to have 300 clock hours of supervised practicum with at least 100 hours of direct client contact. Some states are higher than that, some states are not. Here's your residency information, 3,000 hours, which half of it has to be direct client. So this is in school. This is once you graduate under residency. I put in here the link to some of these forums and websites that I found this stuff at, which I'm going to pull that up. They accept both. They accept both exams, um, state exams, and some of their specific requirements for this state is that you have to have 4 hours of ethics every 2 years and 6 hours in supervision. So they require a 6 hour training in supervision. So some of the things that we want to go over is when you go to these links, the first thing that you go to is their main page, and that tells you like differences between marriage and family, professional counseling, psychology, and social work. And so you can kind of click around and find things. So when you go to your state's page and you're doing this for yourself, you're going to see that they're laid out very different. They're very individualized, but they usually have a board that covers multiple licensures. So you need to make sure that you're looking for the one for professional counseling. So the first thing we're going to look at is the occupational. And so with the occupational provisions, this is a very general provision page. What this does is you'll see this in a lot of the policies and stuff like that. They are going down through here, and every time that they use a term, they are defining what they mean in their handbook and their documentation, what those terms mean. So that if you say, well, I thought this was that, they've got every term that they use in the professional setting of how that's defined. So that's the kind of things you want to pay attention to is if you don't know exactly or you're not familiar, then you need to say, okay, this is what they mean when they say this, because they're telling you exactly what they mean. They tell you who your members of your board is and how they get elected and what the requirements are of each board member, what powers they have, what powers they don't have. So these are things like when you're going to get licensed in these states, you need to kind of know. They tell you how they can remove you from a board. If you're a board member, what can cause you to get discharged from the board? Because as a self-governed board, we want to be very specific and very strict on what we allow, what we don't allow, because we want to govern ourselves as a state board for our licensure and not have outside entities that get control of our licensure. So that's why the boards are so specific per state and govern themselves. So what power, what responsibility, what reimbursement, what duties, all this is in your rules and regulations for every state. So this might look a little different because it's Texas, but each state website is going to have similar, just tweaks regarding their own specific state. They outline what the qualifications are for license requirement. So you can see there's a lot of jargon in here because they have to like label everything like a law, a rule, a legislation, a chapter, whatever. And so they give you the references where this stuff is if you look through there and you want to read more about it. Um, so that's all provided for you. You just have to take the time to really, like, ignorance does not allow you to do something wrong. So You really need to make sure that you go through your state and know what your state provisions are, penalties. So that's the first one. The second form that we want to go over is when you click on the professional counselor, it actually provides you with a whole thing of rules and you can go straight to specific things. So that first one is like an occupational outline of any of the occupations that are governed by that board. This one becomes a lot more specific in the sense of what they allow as a practice. So I'm going to go over this one, first one right here. And so this is how this state defines individual counseling group, marriage, couple, family, addiction, rehabilitation, education. So they define what is acceptable evidence-based treatment, and this will allow you. So in short, you could literally say like your modality of your treatment has to fall under this or you're acting outside of the rules and regulations. So they're very specific in what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. So you need to read these. Okay, so it goes down through all of this, what is considered under okay under play therapy, hypnotherapy. You can see all this stuff. So this is very specific to this state. And then the next one and the last one that we're going to go over is this is like basically like how as a clinician we use the DSM for treatment and diagnosis and treatment plan and all that. This is where this is for your state. This is an incredibly important book. This is the rules and regulations. It has all the information on there of how you become a licensed provider, what their expectations are of you, what is right, what is wrong, how to submit, the process, rulemaking by the executive council, um, how do you, what is leave, what is okay, all the stuff about being a professional licensed counselor, what you have to go through, what you have to do, how you maintain errors on your record so that you don't get in trouble. These are all things that are covered in a full handbook, and these are always usually very lengthy, which is good that they always usually give you all these subsections so you can kind of go through what you're actually looking for. But you need to know like how they remediate. Boards have a right to remediate you, whether it's like, oh, you have to take more ethics because this was an ethical violation, to discharging you, stripping you of your license, post suspending your license indefinitely, um, or just for a temporary period where you have to wait a while before you can practice again, to actual pressing criminal charges. So this stuff is very important, and you want to know what the state that you're going to get licensed in is requiring of you. And so that's why the most important part of this assignment is, do you know where to go to find the information and do you understand the regulations in your state? So that's why the assignment is that you're going to kind of fill in the grid and do that stuff for your own state. And so all this information is here for people in Texas already. And if you're not in Texas or not wanting to be licensed in Texas, you might be doing it for Hawaii or Florida or Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, wherever you want to be licensed at, that's the place that you want to provide the grid for this assignment. Thank you all.